Hello and welcome to FinextraTV EBAday 2020. I'm Hannah Wallace, and kindly calling into our virtual studio now is Nick Lewins, Financial Services Lead, Microsoft Research at Microsoft, and we're going to be talking about technology innovation for financial services. So, hello Nick, thank you very much for calling in.
Oh, thank you, Hannah. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. So I really want to start by setting the scene and you sort of talking us through the current market context and telling us what are some of the big trends you're seeing at the moment.
Well, many of our financial services customers continue to apply significant operational focus on their response to the COVID-19 crisis and their ongoing operational resilience. But we're also seeing many now adopting a parallel strategic track, which calls really for a reinvention of the organisation and its strategy to react to the new normal. The new normal being the underlying digitisation of customer behaviour and employee ways of working, which has been massively accelerated through the COVID-19 crisis. And everyone now believes we're not going back to the way that things were before. In fact, we're transforming even faster into the future. So many companies have had to change their strategy as well as their tactics, and we're seeing an increased focus on digital transformation as part of that. So really three trends are evident. Firstly, retaining relevance in these digital interactions means understanding customer needs and providing relevant frictionless experiences in the context of their financial well-being. And that includes things like embedding human sales and service interactions via the digital channel. And so we see a renewed focus on things like personalization of digital experiences, integrating human collaboration into your digital online sales and service. And as an example of this, recently we launched the back end of Microsoft Teams as a set of APIs that you can use to embed your people into your digital channels. And this is getting a lot of focus from our financial services customers. The second trend we're seeing is AI and machine learning applications really ramping up, starting with use cases like fraud detection, anti-money laundering, customer experience personalization, and trading strategies in capital markets, and starting to move into the more heavily regulated use cases, credit assessment. And AI and cognitive services being pretty widespread now, really, to deliver those digital customer interactions across things like chatbots, digital correspondence reading, and contract understanding. And the third and most long-term trend, we see the embedding of financial services inside the experiences of other industries, such as retail, logistics, and supply chain. And this really means payments and similar financial processes are embedded inside the digital experience that the customer is actually trying to achieve, because like financial processes are usually considered in the eyes of the customer as some sort of friction that is necessary to achieve something else. And so we feel the end point of digital transformation of the financial services industry is that this friction will be removed and the financial service will be entirely integrated in real time into the customer experience or the business process that it's serving. So we're seeing the future looking something like intelligent open banking on steroids, with humans integrated into the experience on demand.
Well, of course, you're very well placed at Microsoft because you're one of the biggest research labs in AI. So let's talk a bit more about that. What's the next big thing for AI in financial services? I mean, we've been speaking about it a lot in the lead up, but what's happening next?
Well, yes, Microsoft Research has a number of research labs globally and over 1,000 researchers active in pretty much
all areas of technology research. And often you'll find Microsoft Research powering innovative new features inside Microsoft products. And frequently you can find us also open sourcing them as well and sharing them with the community. In fact, people don't realize that Microsoft is actually the largest contributor to open source. And in financial services, we support initiatives such as the FinTech Open Source Foundation, or FINOS, and its members who are like large financial services organizations who, like us, are donating substantial intellectual property to open source. So there's a number of new innovations coming out of the lab, which I find really exciting in the context of the use cases that we kind of discussed at the top there. Firstly, really, innovation in natural language processing or natural language understanding is moving really quickly in the research world at the moment. And this is definitely going to translate into significant and rapid uplift in the ability to automate and reason over human communication. And this is exemplified by the fact that this year's hot model is called GPT-3, which we have an exclusive license for as part of our partnership with OpenAI. And that's a 175 billion parameter AI model, which is up 10 times from last year's kind of hot model, which was one from Microsoft Research called Turing, which was a 17 billion parameter model, which itself was 5 times greater than the previous year's hot model, which is Google's BERT model.
Yes.
And so the explosion in the size of these models is leading to sort of human parity levels of performance being achieved in tasks like image captioning, question and answer, document summarization, and things like that. So, if you're still using Google BERT, there's some amazingly better models out there. And the Microsoft Cognitive Service offerings kind of bring those advancements to you as a service, so you can just use those services, and we fold those research advancements into those services, and the length of time between the research breakthrough and things being available to actually use in production is continuing to shorten all the time.
Sure.
So another research breakthrough is just the compute power required to build those models. Last year we built a custom AI supercomputer to train and innovate those types of models, and it's a huge computer that ranks in the top 5 supercomputers in the world. It has 285,000 CPU cores and 10,000 GPU cores, and we've been building on our experience of running the models that power the Bing search engine in specialized hardware since 2016. Innovation's also moving really quickly in other AI areas as well, such as AI games. Game players are always on the frontier of AI algorithm development. They've sort of been that sort of test bed for development of AI models. It's really interesting to see the development of our AI player for the Mahjong game last year. I don't know if you saw that, but it's an agent called Suffix, and it surpassed the top human players to achieve the #1 world ranking last year in Mahjong game. And Mahjong is really interesting because it's much harder and more real-world relevant than games like chess and Go, which have gained a lot of attention in the past when AIs beat the human players in, The important thing about Mahjong is that it's chess and Go are perfect information games, meaning that you can see everything about what's going on the board. But if you're looking at the analogy and the use of these methods in something like capital markets portfolio optimization, you can't see everything. You don't have perfect information about what's going on in the market.
Sure.
And so, Mahjong is much more relevant from that perspective. There's also a lot of hidden state in Mahjong, and you get surprises that happen because of what becomes uncovered over time. And that element of randomness is something that we've had to invent some new research methods for as well. And so we feel really that there's some great methods coming out of the lab that are really going to help in real world applications of AI, not just the gaming sort of side of things. So, natural language processing, AI supercomputing, and game AI are just some of the examples where there's some really fantastic innovations coming out of the lab.
Sure. So as you say, this is a fascinating space, and there's a lot of interesting conversations within it, one of which is the management of sensitive data in the cloud. So can you tell us a bit more about what you're working on in this space?
Sure. I mean, cloud adoption is pretty mainstream in financial services now, particularly after the COVID-19 and the operational resilience that was demonstrated by cloud services to be able to respond to the rapid changes in workloads. And we see, born in the cloud organizations, neobanks and payment companies like ClearBank really gaining market share using a totally, cloud-based platform. For the incumbents, of course, we often hear the #1 limitation to using data to power better customer experiences and utilize those AI and ML tools that I just mentioned is not regulation, nor skills, nor ethical considerations, but actually the legacy data estate that they have. The data of most financial services organizations is still poorly organized, and they lack a single quality source of truth about the data in their organization, and that's the leading cause of AI and ML applications not sort of making it out of a pilot phase into production. And these days, the target state for most organizations is the cloud, and that embeds many of the data hygiene capabilities that are described in industry sort of best practice frameworks like DCAM from the EDM Council, and embed those capabilities into the data management tooling. But getting from the current state to the target state is a significant effort for most of those incumbent organizations because of the amount of technical debt that they've got in their systems estate. And fintechs certainly know this, who want to work with banking and payments data from large banks, certainly know this challenge well. Now there's the opportunity to use the migration to cloud as a forcing function to implement those good data hygiene practices as the cloud migration of data actually happens and processes and analytics processes are moved to cloud processing platforms. In Microsoft Research, we're bringing a lot of innovations into our hyperscale data warehouse service, which is called Azure Synapse, which brings together the best of our SQL Server heritage for sort of relational data at hyperscale, and open source Spark for big data processing, and many innovations to sort of bring these together and provide this hyperscale cloud service, which covers off all of these different requirements that I mentioned. We're also working with the EDM Council to better define the cloud data management capabilities, which is called CDMC for the industry. This is a group that's sponsored by Refinitiv and Morgan Stanley and organized by the EDM Council to really lay out what is industry best practice for data management in the cloud. And there's now grown to a group of about 20 major financial services and cloud providers who are collaborating around this common belief that the migration of data to the cloud can be used as a forcing function to clean up the data estate and implement best practice in data management. So defining industry best practice for data management in the cloud is something that we're all pitching in to do. And MSR is innovating a lot on methods for cryptographic protection of sensitive data across complex analytics pipelines that you typically find in these estates. It brings the opportunity to ensure that sensitive data elements are only decrypted by authorized users and authorized processes, and only for policy compliant processes and purposes. And that there's a trustworthy audit trail of all the processing that's performed on the sensitive values in the data estate. We operate huge experimentation and analytics pipelines ourselves to power the intelligent experiences, like things like meeting transcripts and live translation in Office 365 and Teams, and those collaboration experiences, which are now providing that collaborative digital workspace for over 115 million people every day, including the majority of industry participants, right up to the globally systemically important banks using that platform. And we have leading research in many alternative forms of data processing as well, such as quantum computing, where you can check out our Q-sharp language, privacy enhancing technologies such as homomorphic encryption and confidential computing inside hardware enclaves. And we really believe that prowess with data, including considerations of sensitive data compliance, is indeed at the core of the future of that embedded finance view of the industry's future that I mentioned at the beginning, and really a huge focus for Microsoft researchers.
So, all right, well, there's a lot of information there, and I really want to end on and sort of summarize how Microsoft is helping your financial service customers implement the ethical use of data and AI, because there are some concerns around that area, aren't there?
Yes, of course. It's a really hot topic across financial services companies, the customers of financial services as well, regulators and broader society. For instance, if you take credit assessment, as I mentioned, it's a highly regulated use case. It's a consequential use case for customers and has a lot of attention from banking regulators. And traditional credit scoring involves customers demonstrating their creditworthiness by their credit score and proving their assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. However, for sort of underbanked and less included individuals in society, they might not have those, or they might find proving it difficult. And there's a lot of organizations looking at this so-called thin file credit decisioning problem. And it's something that many organizations would like to do. And it's an area where the application of AI is something that we'd like to be able to support. So these customers can have access to mainstream regulated and trustworthy financial products rather than being excluded from them and having to utilize the unregulated sort of financial providers who are out there. And often the approach is to infer creditworthiness indirectly from observed customer behaviors, and the lender making decisions over this using some advanced analytics and machine learning. But you can't just feed all the data into a black box that finds arbitrary correlations with creditworthiness. It's important to understand what correlations are being used by the model to make the decision. For example, some good creditworthiness indicators might come from payments data, like how regularly they pay their mobile phone bill or their other expenses. But then if the model discovers and uses other correlations, let's say more innovative correlations such as the existence of spelling mistakes in customer correspondence, or dining at least once in a Michelin-starred restaurant, I don't know, or how much people keep their mobile phones charged. These sort of alternative credit decision factors might really be picking up decision factors that from an ethical perspective, and in terms of the disparate impact across different communities and applicants on different backgrounds, might be quite worrisome. And also from the perspective of how robust that behavior is as an indicator once applicants understand those factors and can start to change their behaviors in ways to work around those. So explaining how those models work and assessing the fairness of the decisions is a really big area of innovation here for us here at Microsoft Research. Our researchers have pretty much developed the most used explanation methods in financial services credit modeling today, which are models called SHAP and LIME. And we've open sourced these in a toolkit that we call Interpret ML. The same toolkit also includes an innovative model called Explainable Boosting Machines by another one of our researchers, which is fully explainable, yet on most problems it's just as accurate as neural nets. And we really believe that sort of explodes this popular myth that you have to make a trade-off between the explainability that you want and the accuracy that you need in these models. We're really also working to close the gap between algorithmic explanations on one hand and humans' understanding of the explanation. Because just providing an explanation doesn't mean the recipient of the explanation, the human, actually really understands it. And so we're working on improving this kind of cognitive gap for various stakeholders, such as the data scientist in line 1 who's working on building the model, the model validators that you typically find in line 2, the auditors who are sitting in line 3 and making sure that everything has been done correctly, and then the end consumers who want to understand why they were declined or approved for credit. And all of these different personas have like different needs and contexts. So we're innovating a range of methods in that space. And we're bundling them all into this toolkit we have called FairLearn, which allows you to explore your models for disparate impact and explore options to mitigate unfairness without making too many significant compromises in accuracy. And these tools are really the technical building blocks of responsible AI that bring principles and practices to life in your organization within the context of your multi-layered control framework, of course, for privacy, cybersecurity, and operational risk for these systems. And we're engaged with a pretty broad set of stakeholders on this mission, including a number of financial services companies, global regulators, and AI practitioners, as well as innovating and iterating on those methods. And we move forward our own internal ethical AI practices and tools, and we contribute them to the open source community and the financial services community. We have a really deep belief formed through the 45-year history of Microsoft's tech innovation that all tech innovations can either be used to create good, or they can also be used as weapons that create harms in society. And I'm really proud that Microsoft takes a really broad view of our role in responsible AI, and also we demonstrate through our actions what it means to manage data ethically, such as things like extending GDPR protections to all of our customers globally, rather than just applying it minimally to EU citizens only. So it's really an incredibly exciting time for innovating in responsible AI for the benefit of the financial services industry.
It is indeed, and you've certainly painted the picture for us there and give us a lot of information to go away with. But Nick, for now, we'll leave it there. I hope you enjoy the rest of the EBAday 2020, and thank you so much for calling in and sharing your insights. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Hannah.